not saying that the major risk we face, which totally dwarfs every other risk, is climate change, especially since the other day the parts per billion went through 400 parts per billion, which is at least, etc., etc. It's all there in black and white, and it's getting worse and worse. And when it went to 350, everyone's saying, "Oh, this is even going to do something." There's absolutely no evidence that anyone's doing anything about it. We are the only organisation in Hawke's Bay, in New Zealand, regional councils, and particularly in Hawke's Bay. The Central Hawke's Bay District Council haven't got the time, the money, the effort, or the resources to do anything about it or say anything. Nor is the central. The national government wants to be re-elected. They're talking about job creation, so they're not focusing on that. They've lost their focus completely on climate change. We are specifically an environmental agency. That's our prime focus. Now, all these risks, if the nitrogen in the Tukituk River goes up to 3.5 or 4 parts per billion, the world will not end. If we don't build the dam, the world will not end. Go through all those things, the world will not end. But I mean, it's like holding up the banner saying the end of the world is nigh. But in fact, if you believe the science, it is. So what is more important than that? And we're stuffing around with these little wee things like, is the dam risk, is the lease portfolio risk? Well, it's self-evident. And one of the things I do have, Mr. Chairman, is a history degree, and as my colleagues keep saying, we've got experts in engineering and everything else. My history degree tells me that basically societies they get taken by surprise. The things they worry about are things that probably won't happen. We've got staring us in the face catastrophic climate change, and the Chinese are still importing coal, we're exporting coal. This whole fracking debate, to me, it's not about fracking, it's about fossil fuels. Fracking's a side issue. The problem is pumping more fossil fuel into the atmosphere, which is going to kill us. And the guys in Hawaii say, if we keep doing this, it's catastrophic. And we're sitting saying, oh, well, let's build a dam, well, we won't be. Anyway, I'm repeating myself as usual, but I think this should be the prime one. And Dubai, the cost of water in Dubai, it's a rich country, is $2 a cubic metre to desalinate. I mean, that figure tells you that it's a rich country can afford that. When poor countries can't afford that and they need water, historically there's war, violence. This is serious stuff. So I think the main risk should be, by miles, should be climate change. And I say no one else is going to bring that to the fore. We're the environmental agency. So I just think we've got our heads totally in the sand if we don't make that the major. So I'm repeating myself yet again, Mr. Chairman, and I don't expect anyone to take too much notice, but I just really struggle with the fact that we think the 10 top risks are things like the leasehold land. And I go back to, I think it's an email around the other day, one of the things we've sidelined trees on farms, which is a step in the right direction, and we concentrate on whether we should rename the Clive River. And that's a classical sort of way societies, they don't want to look at the main issue, so they look at detail. So that's my spiel for the day, Mr. Chairman, which I'm repeating myself many ad infinitum. But I think Councillor Remswell, who's said this for 6 years now, has probably been possibly the wisest of us all. Thank you.
Summit. You wish to speak?
I think it's just worth reminding ourselves that the focus of this, not to denigrate anything that's been said about climate change and its importance, these are the top 10 corporate risks. In other words, the risks to this organisation and its stakeholders.
Mr. Chairman, I think that both Councillor Curtin and Councillor Dick raised very pertinent points. The dam, the overriding and underlining reason for pushing ahead with water storage was as a means of mitigating climate change, particularly to the East Coast. Admittedly, it doesn't mitigate global climate change, but this council is not globally responsible for the state of the world. It is quite definitely our response to looking ahead at the future, and the effect of climate change on this was the single most important driving factor in looking at water storage. But I also pick up Councillor Dick's point that these are risks facing council so that council can manage its business more effectively and mitigate those risks. And while we don't in any way not consider that there are risks globally, this council cannot, when it's assessing how it conducts its business, decide how much coal is exported from China. It's actually outside this council's scope of its business. And the whole thing of this risk mitigation, that's why I asked the question before, is to see that we're continuing to practice better and to minimise any risks that this council face in the way it conducts its business. And that's the proper place of this risk analysis.
Okay, well, I'll put that motion then. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'd like to put a further recommendation 3.1, please.
Which is?
Which is that Council asks for a paper updating it on the latest science on climate change and how it can actively mitigate against it by reducing carbon dioxide emissions.
No, sure. Lapse is due to no. Second it. You're happy to second? You seconding. Okay, Councillor Remusel.
Mr. Chair, as far as risk mitigation to the Council goes, one of our big risks if we don't actually follow our vision and our duty of protecting the environment for future generations, which is inherent in the reason that why we're here. I'm not going to labour this point, Mr. Chair, but I think that we have a duty of care to future generations to ensure that they can actually breathe the air, that they can drink the water, that our land is sustainable, and that we pass on our world in a better rather than worse state. As Councillor Gilbertson has mentioned, carbon emissions are increasing at a dangerous rate, and we have been told and we know that it's not going to be sustainable for future generations, full stop. Already Pacific countries are having to look at ways of dealing with it and possibly leaving. So, Mr. Chair, I would ask that we look at this issue in depth as a separate issue, that we take some latest advice about it, and that we actually address the issue and see what we as a council can do, whether it's by planting trees, whether it's by looking at our vehicle costs, whether it's by vehicle emissions, whether it's by alternative energy sources, etc. We've already got solar panels that's part of our 10-year plan process. We're already on the way there, and there's a whole raft of things, but I just ask that we look at ways we can actually focus on this issue as a council and see what we can do about it. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Chairman, in seconding the recommendation, I actually think it's got merit. It doesn't need to be a hugely substantive document, but I don't think it hurts to put on another lens occasionally, backing off what we're doing and actually gathering together the excellent work that is being done and the efforts that are being put in to, one, respond to climate change, and two, to remind ourselves of potential opportunities to mitigate carbon use. I don't think it's. I think it is important for an environmental agency such as ourselves, even it is at a micro level, to occasionally refresh itself as to the impacts it is having in its local environment on the emission of carbon as one aspect of it, and the second one is what is our response to those climate change scenarios. So I don't think it hurts even in summary form to both gather together what we are doing, remind ourselves and the public what we're doing, and two, to look at potential opportunities to do things better if they are out there for us.
Chairman, I support the recommendation. I note in doing so that Louis Chambers, who's Hawke's Bay's first Rhodes Scholar for many a long year, has actually started, is quite a bright cook I think, has started a specific organisation called, I think, Generation Zero, because he identifies climate change as the biggest threat to his generation. I mean, he's 23 or 24, so I certainly support this recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The point I was going to raise is not in opposition to the recommendation at all, but I just wondered if it would be pertinent to, if the recommendation is passed, for the report to come to the E&S committee. That would be the right vehicle for it, would it not? Rather than through to this committee.
I'll take an opportunity to speak. I'm not going to support this motion at this time on the basis that a huge amount of work involved. I mean, even a summary, cursory document it's such a wide-ranging volume of different issues. I'm just not sure that the timing is right now for this council to get involved in putting quite a chunk of resource, and regardless of whether it's summary or otherwise, it will be a body of work to pull it all together and have it in one place at one time. We, in the normal course of our duty, keep up to speed with all the different scientific papers and work that is coming through. It's what we do on a daily basis. So to put it all together in one place is admirable. Is a volume of work that in my mind is going to distract a whole lot of other work streams that we've got going on at the moment. So I'm sorry I can't support this at this time.
Mr. Chairman, I too feel it admirable to look at a number of things that globally affect all of us. I don't think it is the time and place of this council with a heavy workload to be taking on general issues such as that. We actually know that the underlying cause of the stress on all the world's resources is overpopulation. So perhaps we should have a paper on how we can curb world populations, including that of New Zealand. But the important thing is, when we started this risk analysis, climate change was one of the things that we looked at. And it wasn't climate change globally, it was how council was responding within its own operation to reducing those risks. It was reported back to council that this had, and I go back and just suggest to councillors that they go back and consult their past agendas and the information provided, that council had taken on, the staff had taken on all these issues around how they were responding, and felt that it had reached within the council operation a lower risk profile. And that was why it's one of those that sits as the underlying risks rather than of the top 10. And to go back and redo all the work that has said, right, we've looked at these issues, we've identified this is the progress we've made, we now think this risk is reduced, I think is just reinventing the wheel for the sake of work. So I cannot support doing further work on it.
No other speakers? You wish to speak, Councillor McGregor?
Yes, I'll support this resolution, but I take note of the points you've made that we cannot afford to allow this exercise to use up considerable resources of research, staff time, etc. I'd envisage something, I hesitate to say cursory, I don't mean that at all, but something that lays out the basic principles and signals that this council, in our own tiny way in the context of the globe, is serious about this issue, and we want our constituents to be conscious of the fact that we all must do our share to try and mitigate climate change.
I support it. I see it as being basically a desktop exercise which should be done when there is the capacity to do it. So certainly wouldn't be my expectation that it's going to the next Environment Management Committee meeting.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the support for my colleagues on this really important issue. And I'm very happy that we're going to be hopefully looking at this, and I concur with Councillor Dick that it's not something that needs to be a huge, lengthy or work-heavy attempt at all. There's already heaps of information. The Royal Society has lots of information there already, and the physicians and scientists for social responsibility, they have quite a strong position on climate change. It's very easy to access that information over the internet, or talk to any of those scientists. And as Councillor Gilbertson said, I think it's actually your cousin Louis Chambers who is actually he's actually not the first Rhodes Scholar in many a long year Councillor Gilbertson. He's actually the second from Havelock High in the last 10 years. So, I'd just like to point out that the Generation Zero, the young people, they are actually doing a road tour around New Zealand in July, so perhaps we could invite Louis to talk to council here, or perhaps councillors would like to attend their presentations because they're very, very enlightening. Mr. Chair, it's 6 years ago, actually, before I was elected to council, I attended a meeting of the Environment Committee, and there was a presentation on climate change from one of the scientists here. He's now gone over to Australia. And that's the last time I believe that we've had a really good presentation on climate change around that, around this table. And since that time, the last 6 years, the science has got stronger, and the doubters have got fewer. Mr. Chair, as far as world population goes, the sad fact is that it's the poorest people in the world, the third world countries, who traditionally do produce the most children because it's part of their survival, the way they survive. They are the ones who are suffering the most from the emissions of the first world countries, who are actually struggling to keep their populations up. But it's the first world countries such as ourselves who are producing the most emissions, and the third world countries that are suffering from it. So it's no longer current to say that this is an issue of population, Mr. Chair. And finally, I'd just like to say that actually I'm attending a climate change symposium at Parliament next Friday, and I'm happy to share with you and any others the latest from that symposium at that time. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'll put that motion in. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. No. Those in favour? Done. And against? Carried. Thank you. Right. Item 13, Guppy Road Reserve Land Transfer.